Welcome to Politically Connected, a podcast on everything politics and governance in Kenya and Africa. I'm your host, Diana Ngao, and today we're talking about someone who has been the center of gravity in our political lexicon since God knows when. We've been accused of always speaking about him on this podcast. Raila this, Raila that, Raila that. But love him or hate him, he's still a key figure in our politics today. And what was witnessed on 7th of March made us have to do an explainer series like this, where we're going to unpack Raila's history of handshakes. When did it start? Many remember the handshakes of 2018 and now the most recent handshake of 2025. But did you know there was a handshake of 1997 where Jogoo ilimeza tinga? So, join me in this explainer as we look into the history of Honorable Raila Odinga's dance with power, betrayal, and handshakes. Betrayal begets betrayal, a history of Raila Odinga's dance with power, betrayal, and handshakes. One of Shakespeare's most famous political plays, Julius Caesar, was a play on the tragedy of power, betrayal, and fate, centered around the assassination of the Roman dictator Julius Caesar and its aftermath. The phrase "beware of the Ides of March" comes from the Shakespeare's play on Julius Caesar, where a soothsayer warns Caesar of his impending doom. Over time, the Ides of March becomes synonymous with political betrayal and dramatic upheaval. Why am I telling you this story? You see, politics is a game of alliances, betrayals, and second chances. And if Kenyan politics were a Shakespearean tragedy, Raila Odinga would be Julius Caesar, always at the center of power struggles and always betrayed at the crucial moment. From the Ides of March-style betrayals in Kanu to the unexpected peace pacts with the fiercest rivals, Raila has mastered the art of political resurrection through handshakes. But were these handshakes genuine peace deals or survival tactics? Let's dive into history and look into Raila's handshakes from 1997 to the most recent one on 7th March 2025 with President William-Ruto. Our story begins in 1997. Raila Odinga, after losing the presidency under the National Development Party (NDP, surprises everyone by shaking hands with President Daniel Arap Moi. And what was the deal? That Raila merges NDP with KANU in exchange for the cabinet position as Minister of Energy. The agreement was simple. Raila was promised a future in KANU's leadership, an inside track to the presidency when Moi steps down. Or so he thought. The Ides of March moment arrived, when Raila is expecting to be Moi's heir and Moi drops a bombshell. He picks a very young Uhuru Kenyatta, a political novice at the time as his successor. Feeling betrayed, Raila stages a dramatic walkout with KANU rebels and forms the Liberal Democratic Party, LDP. He doesn't stop there. He goes across and joins forces with Mwai Kibaki and the National Alliance of Kenya, forming the National Rainbow Coalition, NAC. And in a grand political masterstroke, Raila declares Kibaki Tosha, uniting opposition forces and delivering Kibaki a landslide victory in 2002. But history repeats itself. After Kibaki is sworn in as president, Raila expects his promise as prime minister role as per the supposed secret MOU that was signed before election. Allegedly, the MOU included constitutional reforms to be done in the new government's first 100 days that included the creation of the prime minister position. However, tragedy struck the Kibaki and his government after attaining power, which made it impossible to attain some of the promises in the first 100 days. Yet, after gaining power, Kibaki sidelines him, appointing a government dominated by his allies. It felt like another political betrayal to Honorable Raila Odinga. Furious, he reorganizes his allies, and by 2005, he's leading the no campaign against Kibaki's constitutional referendum. The referendum seemed to be a proxy war between Kibaki and Raila, oranges versus bananas. Raila wins and Kibaki loses, and in this response, Kibaki fires Raila and his allies from government. This marks the end of their alliance and the birth of the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM. Then comes the explosive 2007 election. Raila runs against Kibaki and claims victory, but the Electoral Commission declares Kibaki the winner, and chaos erupts. The country was on the brink of collapse. Hence then, international pressure forces a negotiation. Enters Kofi Annan and a deal was struck. A historical handshake between Raila Odinga and Kibaki led to the Grand Coalition government, where Raila becomes Kenya's prime minister. This time, Raila gets his promised position. But power struggles within the coalition made governing so difficult. It seemed that Kibaki had retained executive power and Raila was often sidelined in major decisions. A sense of betrayal began to grow. However, the 2010 constitution was passed. Kenya geared up to the 2013 election under this new constitution, and Raila, under the umbrella of CORD, was expected to ride this momentum of the coalition reforms. But his former allies, Uhuru Kenyatta and William-Ruto, joined forces to compete against him in the presidential race. Uhuru-Ruto sweeps the country and wins the 2013 presidential race. Raila cries foul but quickly moves forward, preparing for the 2017 election cycle. In 2017, Raila faced off against Uhuru again under a new alliance called the National Super Alliance, NASA, with ANC leader Mudavadi, Ford Kenya's Wetangula, and Wiper's Kalonzo Musyoka as his running mate. The elections were disputed and NASA petitioned the Supreme Court. For the first time in history, the Supreme Court nullifies the presidential election and calls for a repeat election. Raila mobilizes his base not to participate in the repeat elections. But when Uhuru wins the repeat election, Raila refuses to recognize his presidency. Protest erupts towards the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018. Tear gas Mondays became a phrase coined by Raila supporters depicting the protests. The political tension was high. And then, on 9th March 2018, on the footsteps of Harambee House, a handshake between the fierce rivals Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga was witnessed. This is when we see the emergence of the Building Bridges Initiative, BBI, to address political instability, inclusivity, and governance issues following the disputed 2017 election, or so they said. It was said that the initiative was aimed at uniting the country and preventing post-election violence. However, this also signaled a political agreement between Uhuru Kenyatta to support Raila Odinga's presidential bid in the upcoming 2022 election, therefore locking out his deputy, William-Ruto, from the seat of power. Come 2022, and Uhuru backs Raila against Ruto, and the Azimio coalition is formed. A spirited campaign against the Kenya Kwanza is launched months to the election. Despite the state's support, the heavily contested elections resulted in William-Ruto being declared as president and Azimio side disputing the election. Off to the Supreme Court they went. However, there are whispers of the betrayal of Uhuru Kenyatta. Some coined it the long con. They blamed Uhuru for not fully mobilizing his base for Raila, leaving him vulnerable to Ruto's populist campaign. After the Supreme Court ruling, Azimio accepts the ruling that Ruto maintains his win. However, they agree to create a formidable opposition to keep William Ruto's government in check. In 2023, the Azimio coalition led by Raila Odinga led massive protest and accused the Ruto government of illegitimacy and failing to address the rising cost of living. The protests, which lasted almost 4 months, resulted to many deaths from the heavy-handed force of the police and thousands injured. It gave birth to the Sufuria movement, where we saw two secretary generals, Jeremiah Kioni of Jubilee Party and Edwin Sifuna of ODM, adorn sufurias on their heads, signifying the hunger due to the rising cost of living. Due to the rising political tension and the rising number of casualties from the protest, the Azimio coalition and the Kenya Kwanza government agreed to dialogue, and it was coined the National Dialogue Committee, NADCO, which was tasked to facilitate a consensus on addressing issues concerning the people of Kenya, an audit of the 2022 election, and the formation of a new IBC commission. Since then, a lot has happened in between. But let's move on to where we're at now in the present. After 2 years of tension, Raila and Ruto shake hands on the 7th of March 2025 during the MOU signing between Kenya Kwanza, UDA, and ODM, a move that was welcomed by some but demonized by most. The agreement between the two parties is to work together on a 10-point agenda, including the full implementation of the NADCO report, which means Raila gets a formal opposition role with state funding, while Ruto secures national stability. But is this another short-term alliance before the next political earthquake? One thing is certain, Raila's political career is a cycle of alliances and betrayals, just like the Ides of March in Roman history. So will this handshake last, or will Raila make his next grand move? Betrayal begets betrayal. In my opinion, we are yet to see the lasting effects of the political betrayals of William Ruto and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, play in effect with the new union, or what we call the political marriage between UDA and ODM. Thanks for watching, and in the next explainer, we will be unpacking the 10 points of the MOU signings between ODM and UDA, the full implementation of NADCO, and why it should matter to us. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's see you in the next episode.